Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the prevalence of trauma and the techniques that heal it. If the bad news is more Americans are feeling excessive stress these days, then the good news is that many treatments work to soothe that stress if help is sought out. College students who receive treatment for depression and anxiety report substantial gains in academic performance. Their grades are better. The number one cause of suicide for college students and all suicides is untreated depression and people choosing not to get help. 90% of college students who die by suicide never receive any on-campus or off-campus mental health services. And roughly 20 to 40% of all American college students experience a mental health problem. Why is that? What's often at the root of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and other stress conditions? The number one answer, trauma. We'll call it a UTAP event. U is for unexpected. The event is unexpected. T stands for threatening. It's dramatic and threatening to the person's survival. A is for they feel alone. It's isolating, creating feelings of aloneness with nobody to help. And P for powerless. There's no strategy to get the person out. The person feels powerless. So when a person fears for their life, experiences intense pain, or witnesses a tragic or violent act, that person can be described as having a traumatic experience or a UTAP event. Some people are more resilient than others, so reaction to traumatic events are varied from person to person. Some trauma is repeated or ongoing, such as that of childhood abuse or military combat. Other examples of traumatic events include bullying, which is more common these days, car accidents, sexual assault, neglect, natural disasters, growing up in an unstable home, street violence, or battling a life-threatening condition. If the trauma and feelings associated with it are not resolved, serious long-term issues can be developed as researched in the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE study. PTSD sets in and ruins many relationships, creates dysfunctional thinking, sleep disturbances, nightmares, anxiety, depression, dissociative episodes, excessive fears, self-injurious behaviors, addictive traits, and as the ACE study found, that these ACE experiences, again, adverse childhood experiences, cause several diseases, including heart disease, cancer, COPD, liver disease, and so many others, as you can see from the illustration. We all think, genetics causes it. Not always. Well, how does that disease occur? The adverse childhood experiences occur before the age of 18. And as you can see from the illustration, this causes impairment in the person's social life, their emotional life, and cognitive thinking. To deal with the stress symptoms, the traumatized person engages in risky behaviors like the overuse of alcohol, food, substances, risky sexual behavior, and the like, because it helps soothe the PTSD symptoms. Over the next few decades, disease, disability, and social problems sets in. And then that person dies an early death compared to those who didn't have adverse childhood experiences. It's very sad. But if the person can become aware of the connection between the trauma and symptoms that they feel, they can often have the trauma healed through proven therapies, and the PTSD symptoms subside. Researchers have been studying the connection between trauma and addiction in order to understand why so many drug and alcohol abusers have histories of traumatic experiences. The ACE study showed, after data from 17,000 patients, that if a child had 4 or more different traumatic events, the child is 5 times more likely to become an alcoholic, 60% more likely to become obese, and 46 times more likely to become an injection drug user than the general population. Studies by the Veterans Administration have led to estimates that between 35 to 70% of veterans with PTSD abuse drugs and alcohol. which makes sense. The terrible symptoms of PTSD seem more manageable through the use of sedating or stimulating drugs. But addiction soon becomes another problem later, and before long the cure no longer works, as you know, and causes far more pain to the already suffering person. Years of self-medicating effectively dull the memory of the trauma, so many times the link between trauma and PTSD are never made. Over 2/3 of people seeking treatment for some sort of addiction report one or more traumatic life events. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, reports the following information. An estimated 62% of adults surveyed across 23 states reported that they had one adult childhood experience during childhood, and nearly 1/4 reported that they had experienced 3 or more ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. These ACEs can have lasting negative effects on the health and well-being and opportunity. And as mentioned before, these exposures disrupt the healthy brain, affect social development, compromise immune systems, and can lead to substance misuse and other unhealthy coping behaviors. The evidence confirms that these exposures increase the risk of injury, sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, mental health problems, and maternal teen pregnancy, involvement in sex trafficking, and a wide range of chronic diseases. ACEs are the leading causes of death, such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and suicide. ACEs can also negatively impact education, employment, and earnings potential. The childhood years from the prenatal period to late adolescence are the building block years that help set the stage for adult relationships, behaviors, health, and social outcomes. Adverse childhood experiences and conditions such as living in under-resourced or racially segregated neighborhoods, frequently moving, experiencing food insecurity, and other instability can cause toxic stress. Some children may face further exposure to toxic stress from historical and ongoing traumas due to systemic racism or the impacts of multi-generational poverty resulting from limited educational and economic opportunities. A large and growing body of research indicates that toxic stress during childhood can harm the most basic levels of the nervous system, endocrine, immune systems, and that such exposures even alter the physical structures of DNA. Changes in the brain from toxic stress can affect such things as attention deficit, impulsive behavior, decision-making, learning, emotions, and response to stress. They're at increased risk of becoming involved in crime and violence and using alcohol or drugs, and engaging in other health risk behaviors such as early initiation of sexual activity, unprotected sex, and suicide attempts. It kind of all makes sense. They are susceptible to disease, illness, and mental health challenges over their lifetime. The CDC offers several strategies that can prevent ACEs from happening that include, number one, strengthening economic supports for families. 2, promoting social norms like public education campaigns to protect against violence. 3, ensuring a strong character and start for children by early childhood home visitation, high quality child care, preschool enrichment with family engagement. 4, teaching skills like social emotional learning, safe dating, healthy relationship skills, and parenting skills. 5, connecting youth to caring adults and activities such as mentoring and after-school programs. 6, being proactive using enhanced primary care, treatment to lessen the harms of ACEs, treatment to prevent the problem behavior, and use family-centered treatment for substance use and disorders. In addition to social economic strategies to help those with trauma and stress-related conditions, I have researched several therapies and healing techniques that come from many different countries and cultures from around the world. I'll discuss the therapies and techniques that include acupuncture, energy psychology methods, energy medicine, meditation, Native American healing techniques, Qigong, yoga, and many others. I'll provide the latest research studies that tell us how effective they are in treating many of these symptoms, as I've mentioned, and demonstrate how to perform them so that you can do it as well. Acupuncture has been around for at least 3,000 years, originating in China, and the first documentation of acupuncture described it as an organized system of diagnosis and treatment, and is in the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine. That dates back to 100 BCE, a few thousand years ago. By this time, qi, or life force flows channels, were well established, and the information likely stemmed from a compilation of traditions passed down over the centuries. Similar techniques have been found in many parts of the world. Several mummies from 5,000 years ago were discovered in Siberia, Peru, and Chile, with exact acupuncture point markings on them. One of them was Otzi the Iceman, a well-preserved mummy found in an ice glacier who had 57 tattoos located on modern-day acupuncture points. Gradually, the practice of acupuncture was mastered and insertion points became more specified until it became a standard practice in China alongside massage, diet, and herbs. The ancient Chinese believed that there's a universal life energy called qi that's in every living creature. This energy is said to circulate throughout the body along specific meridians or pathways in the body along which vital energy flows, associated with specific organs. As long as this energy flows freely throughout the meridians, health is maintained. But once the flow or energy becomes blocked, the system is disrupted and pain and illness occur. Acupuncture therefore works to reprogram and restore normal functions by stimulating certain points on the meridians in order to free up the qi energy in the body to attain well-being. Research on the positive effects of acupuncture on anxiety and depression are numerous. A meta-analysis, which is the best type of research, is a collection of all the research that's been done on a subject, and an average of the data and results are computed to obtain a significant result as to whether the treatment was successful or not. In 2017, Jay McDonald, in a review called The Acupuncture Evidence Project, a comparative literature review, drew upon 136 systematic reviews and meta-analysis. These included extensive investigations by the World Health Organization and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as 27 Cochrane reviews, and examined pooled data from more than 1,000 random controlled studies. The studies were peer-reviewed and showed moderate to high-quality evidence and beneficial effects of acupuncture for 46 conditions out of 122 medical conditions across 14 clinical areas. Many of these were psychiatric conditions as well, but the rest found supportive evidence was effectiveness for 117 out of 122 conditions that spanned between the years of 2005 and 2016. It even showed success in treating depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia, and hypertension. The next type of technique that helps are flotation labs that were invented and developed by scientists in the 1950s. But through the years, it was seen as by scientists as a hippie fad in the 1960s and 70s, and gained popularity in the last 2 decades. There were 85 float centers in our country in 2011. In 2019, 250 and growing. Oaklander writes how people with PTSD are getting help from flotation labs. What are they? They're tanks of water filled with about 2,000 pounds of Epsom salt that make one float like a buoy. one can lie back on the water and float without tensing a muscle. Then the floater turns off the lights and it goes dark and into sensory deprivation. That allows people to relax into a quiet calm, and one can choose a 40, 50, or 90-minute float. They run about $50 to $100 a float. But what does the research say? Neuropsychologist Justin Feinstein has his own float center where he conducts research. Small waterproof sensors and an EEG device on the foreheads measures brain waves wirelessly. They enter an MRI machine before and after the float to see how floating changes areas of activation in the brain. When somebody takes an anti-anxiety drug like Ativan, they can see that in the brain that in the amygdala, which is responsible for the fight-flight response, completely shuts off, which doesn't happen with relaxation alone. Feinstein's research shows that flotations are doing the same exact thing with the amygdala. And perhaps this is the reason why those with terrible PTSD are getting relief. According to Oaklander, people have reported that 3 floats will subside anxiety and hypervigilance. After 3 months of floating, night sweats stop as well. Thomas H. Fine, who does research at the University of Toledo College of Medicine, published studies in the 1990s through blood samples. After 40-minute floats, people showed improvements in blood pressure, mood, pain, muscle tension, and stress-related hormones from floating. Though the sample sizes were small, research continued. In 2006, the International Journal of Stress Management found that for a group of 70 with stress-related pain, 12 float sessions reduced pain, stress, anxiety, and depression while improving sleep and optimism. Those positive effects stuck around for 4 months after treatment was stopped. In 2018, a small study by Feinstein and his colleagues had 31 people with high anxiety do a 90-minute float session. Later, they watched a 90-minute nature documentary. After floating, people had lowered anxiety and muscle tension and felt more relaxed, serene, and mindful than they did watching the film. Their blood pressure was also lower. Further research needs to be done with bigger studies, but the results are very promising. In the next video, you'll learn how I've worked with community college students to relieve their stress and anxiety with techniques that work in a matter of minutes. I'll see you then. Thank you.